Okay, it's Toby from Heavyweight MMA here today with MMA fighter Colby Thicknesse, talking about a different type of fight for a change. Today we're talking about Ariel Helwani versus Brendan Schaub, battle of two knobs. not really, but yeah, it's an interesting one, man. We got two opposite types of people that are having an argument. It's kind of weird.
It is like you have Brendan Schaub, who's like the sort of ex guy in the know with fighting and everything like that, and he's sort of now going the Helwani route, whereas Helwani's always been that sort of MMA journalist guy. And now they're sort of like butting heads.
Yeah, man. There's different videos popping up. I believe it started when Ariel Helwani. It just felt like he's been getting picked on over the years by Brendan. Lots of little pokes here and there, and Brendan's kind of comes across as your classical sort of jock type of guy. You know that he's a fighter. He knows he's got respect through that, and he feels like he looks at someone like Helwani and he thinks he's better than him, really. And he kind of says that like We'll play a video and you can have a listen and then we'll have a chat about it.
Unless you book some big name fighter or you have 17 fighters on your show, nobody gives a fuck about your personal opinion. So you have to somehow muster something, trying to figure it out.
Stir the pot.
Because everything you've ever done has never worked out for you. That's how these guys operate. And it doesn't end well for any of them because they don't have any talent. Nobody's paying attention. So they have to book big guests or they have to talk shit about Joe Rogan just to get views. Because if they get on here and rant to a camera like I do for an hour, nobody listens. Because they've never walked the walk. They've never been in the fire. They're reporting on the storm. I've been in the storm.
Yeah. So Brendan is basically just talking himself up and talking Ariel down, you know, saying that because Ariel had never been a fighter, his opinion doesn't mean anything and no one's interested in listening to what he has to say. It's kind of funny. They're both kind of self-obsessed a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I think they're both like egomaniacs. Is like Ariel thinks he's like, he arguably is one of the best MMA journalists and that, but like he has that sort of inflated self-worth, and Brendan Schaub is just like on another level. So it's obvious they're gonna butt heads. But like calling how Brendan went like talentless and says stuff about like Ariel. Like Ariel actually has the difference between Ariel and Brendan. When Ariel has fighters on his show, he's actually good about the fighters. He asks them good questions. He gets good topics every going. When Brendan does a feud truck diary, he interrupts them like every 5 minutes, or not even, probably 50 seconds sort of thing. Like he's not a very sort of interesting journalist in that way. I know he tries to get into that space and that, but anytime I've seen any sort of topic or anything with Brendan regarding like fighters, or even there was one I saw of him and Brian Ortega, and it was on this Carabasas podcast or something, and Ortega was telling a story and Brendan interrupted him like 3 times, and at the end Ortega literally like hands in the head, shook his head like this, and then just let Brendan continue because it always has to be about him.
Yeah, man, he does seem like pretty self-absorbed and he does think he's pretty special. And the first thing that I noticed when Ariel did a comeback was kind of pointing that out. So we'll have a listen to that one now.
This man legitimately thinks that he is better than us. I want you guys to realize that. This man thinks he's better than us. And when I say us, I don't just mean me. I don't just mean the MMA media. I mean you as well. Watch the demeanor. Listen to the words. This man thinks that he is better than us, and he's sitting.
Yeah, man. So I think he's pretty much right. If you do listen to the demeanor of Brendan and what he talks about and the way he talks, he does actually think he's better than everyone. That's what he comes across as, which in some respects he is. I mean, he was fighting in the heavyweight division of the UFC. So this is probably where his confidence comes from. It's not everyone that can fight in general. There's not many people can fight, and there's not very many people at all that can fight in the heavyweight division of the UFC and even have some stellar performances like KOing Crow Cop, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Like you can't take any, even though Brendan obviously didn't get to the belt or anything, he still had a successful sort of heavyweight run in the UFC. He was still like a good athlete and everything, but I think he's trying to take them sort of past successes and use that as like sort of an excuse or anything for anything that doesn't go well. Like if his comedy or something didn't go, he's like, oh, you know, I only started because of it, was focusing on other things that were, it's sort of like he dives into like a lot of avenues. Whereas what I respect about Ariel is he at least stuck to his one. He know what his network is. He's there for the fighters, even though he sometimes like instigates some shit and stuff like that. He gets things wrong, but at least like at the end of the day, he's actually there and he does want to see sort of the best for the fighters. Where it seems like Schaub's sort of vibe is he's the sort of guy he'll have a guest on just so he can sort of talk about himself to the guest and get the guest audience to start trying to follow along with him, sort of thing. So it seems like he's sort of really in it for himself with sort of any avenue he sort of takes.
Yeah, man. And I must admit, I've never been a fan of Ariel Helwani, but I feel like the reason is probably something similar to the way Brendan comes at it is like, you know, we're looking at a fighting sport. You know, we kind of, as people that have trained, etc., you kind of look at people that in that way and you think, well, look at this guy, this nerdy guy, like all he can do is talk. He's nothing, you know, and Brendan talks about him like that. But when you listen to what Helwani says in the next clip, he's talking about what the media does. And you kind of forget about that he's the one that's supporting the MMA and the fighters. And he's actually like the backbone of these guys in some way, because he's the one making the money by supporting them and doing shows on them, you know?
Yeah, exactly right. Like if you didn't have the reporters and the guys like Helwani to actually talk to when they have upcoming fights and they have big performances, even like guys like him, Submission Radio and stuff like that, you need people like that in the media who actually shows a genuine interest in it, and they're actually interested in the fighters, they're invested in the sport, and they want to sort of use their platform. Even though you might not necessarily like him as like a person or how he comes across, he's still doing it for like the benefit of the sport and the benefits for the athletes he has on. Whereas Brendan sort of does the same thing, but it seems like all the benefits he just wants for himself.
Yeah, man. Let's listen to the take from Ariel about the media side of things, which kind of opened my eyes up a little bit, I must admit.
You sit there and you talk about how MMA media are a bunch of hacks. You sit there and you talk about how MMA media are a bunch of losers who never walked into the fire, who are just weathermen, who have no talent. First of all, let me explain something to all the fighters, all the managers, all the promoters, all the hanger-ons, all the sisters, all the brothers, all the mothers, all the fathers involved in MMA, in the MMA community. Let me be very, very clear about something right here and now, because we've heard it since the beginning of time. We've heard it since we all started. MMA media are hacks. They're losers. They can't hang. They don't know what they're doing. These are the men and women who have devoted their lives in some way, shape, or form to covering you. They're the ones who have told editors, hey, you should focus on this sport. You should focus on these fights, on these fighters, on these organizations. We're usually the first to go, believe it or not. But these are the people that focus on you and cover you and think and talk about you 24/7. It's not the other media that you wish you were covered by. Trust me, I just came from the mainstream. They don't know you like we know you. They don't care about you like we care about you. They don't follow you and cover you like we do. And so whenever you guys talk about MMA media being hacks, what does that say about you?
Stop it there, yeah, but we get the idea. Yeah, so obviously Ariel's pointing out a good thing that the support of the MMA fighter is handled by these guys, and you know they deserve some respect, right?
Yeah, definitely. You can't take anything away from the guys who actually sort of, like I said before, they show an invested interest in the sport. They're actually genuinely interested in the guys. You can tell by the ways they ask questions. They have little sort of tidbits of information that like the mainstream media and that don't care. Like they are invested. They do want to see, like, I want to build the story. They ask questions, getting backstories. They ask how this affected that, what's going on here, plans for the future. They ask sort of lots of really good questions, which does eventually lead to sort of like the bigger growth of the sport in that, which I think Brendan, on the other hand, does a terrible job at that. Whereas Helwani's probably, even though mixed opinions on him, I do think he's probably hands down the best sort of journalist in the game for that respect. Whereas he'll ask the good questions. He'll ask some awkward, hard questions that other reporters wouldn't dare to do. But at the end of the day, it's his job. He got to do it. And I sort of respect him for that.
Yeah, man. And then as we talked before, this is like the pressure cooker is about to explode. You know, Brendan Schaub's been poking at him all these years. He's really upset. He's just like that that nerdy guy's been getting picked on and picked on. He just comes in and explodes, you know, and he just decides to like destroy everything or verbally destroy everything that Brendan's ever done. So it's a good little clip coming up where he just bags Brendan out for basically his whole life.
Now let's talk about you. College football, how'd that go? How'd NFL go? How did fighting go? How did comedy go? How did podcasting go? How did TV go? Did you achieve your goals?
Anyway, basically just destroyed everything Brendan's ever done. And it's a fair point, right? It's a good comeback considering like Brendan's bagging him out as being pretty much worthless, that no one wants to listen to him and he hasn't walked into the fire. It's a fair call, you know, to kind of point out his shortcomings as well, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Like you said, Brendan's been sort of having to dig at him and having to go at him for years. So like eventually he's going to respond. He absolutely did destroy him with that response. He listed like 6 things which Brendan had sort of like obviously moderate success in some of the fields, comedy and TV, and that definitely word is good. And I think that sort of shows the sort of character genre is Brendan's the type of guy who he wants to have his sort of hand involved in everything. He wants to be involved in everything. He can't really focus on one thing. Then you have Ariel's the type of guy where he wants to be in that one sort of niche network, but he's the type of guy who he wants to run that network. So you sort of have like the ego of wanting to be involved in everything. Then you have the ego of the other side who wants to be like the best of the one sort of genre of what they do.
But then speaking about ego, I don't know if you've been watching Ariel lately, but he does some good interviews, right? He's got good people on. So definitely. I listen to it. I don't really like him, but I like the people he's interviewing. I like the way he gets the information out of the people pretty well. But he started to get a lot more cocky and he does offer up his opinions and things about fighting sometimes. And there's no need, right? I feel like I don't really respect him that much. And he has gotten a little bit more cocky, probably because of the new group that he's working with, rather than before he was a bit more controlled. Now he feels a bit cockier. He says a bit more cocky things. And you see that in this next little clip. He talks himself up, talking about he's the king, and if you come at the king, you best not miss. But it's just kind of funny coming from him.
But I will remind you guys, it's not a gimmick; it's a lifestyle. If you come at the king, you best not miss.
He's hardcore now. Anyway. So he went pretty hard at Brendan, you know, and actually implicated his friend as well. And of course they had to come back. So you'll see some comebacks in a minute from Brendan. Brendan doesn't really hold back either. He talks about like basically saying about how Ariel as a journalist is apparently very difficult to work with, which he's mentioned many times before, but he came back with that again. In his podcast. So we'll have a listen to that.
When you come to LA, I can guarantee you 2 things. You're going to get a parking ticket, you're going to hear Ellen's an asshole.
Yeah.
When you get an MMA, you're going to hear 2 things. Take it easy, no, hold on. You're going to hear 2 things. No,
don't go too, let's not.
I'm not. You're going to hear 2 things.
Yeah.
Khabib's the GOAT.
Yeah.
And the journalist is a complete nightmare to work with.
Okay, I don't know.
That's not me. I didn't start that.
But you're already doing it. No, I don't want to do that.
No, I didn't start that.
But you're being mischievous. Look,
we need journalists. They need to tell the stories of the warriors.
No, you're doing some stuff now. Stop fucking with the machinery. Hold on.
I must admit, I do like that part where he says, we need the journalists. We need them to tell the stories of the warriors. Like he's just tongue-in-cheek having an attack at him, right? But to be honest, like no one gives a fuck about like the infighting and how difficult some is to work with, right? We just watch them from the surface. We don't care about that back of house problems that people have, etc. Right? We just want to see the finished product, you know. So what he's talking about might be something he's involved in, with people getting annoyed with people, etc. But the general public and the general fans don't care about that stuff, I think, anyway.
No, definitely not. Like all they want to see is they just want to see a reporter who asks good questions and sort of gets the fighters talking about topics that you sort of want to hear them talk about. There's nothing worse than, say, good example. I can't think. There was one where I listened to Brendan Schaub where he had a fighter on, and it was mostly about Brendan Schaub. It was about the fighter, but it wasn't actually about fighter. It was about different things. And like, what's the point of having these guys on? Like, sure, it's cool to see like their different avenues and things of interest, but at the end of the day, if you have a guy who's preparing for an upcoming fight, or if he's just after a fight, you sort of want to hear them talk about the actual fight and the training preparations, even if it sort of might be repetitive for them, that's why people want to see. They don't like, it's like saying if you interview Conor McGregor 2 weeks out before his fight against Khabib, for example, you're not going to ask him what's he doing in his spare time. That it's going to be solely focused on the fight, his training preparation, everything like that. Whereas Brendan takes a different route, and that's what Ariel is good where he'll ask the questions like, what's the training schedule, what's different, and all of them sort of MMA related questions, which us as a fans, that's what we want to hear about.
Yeah, man. And the next point that Brendan said was kind of just downgrading him, saying he's not important, saying that Ariel it's all been really tough. He's back at square one now, which actually, when you look at the way Ariel is now, I don't think he feels like he's back at square one. I think he feels like he's free suddenly. Like, I think some sort of constraints have been taken away from him. He's actually a bit more free. But let's have a listen to Brendan's next take on it.
So, hey, take it easy.
He's not important enough to have a beef with. I mean, but he has to do it, so I get it. Dude. It's been tough. Man. Hasn't worked out. You're back at square one.
All right. Let's move on.
Just again, a bit of the bullying, nothing very, it's not a real good comeback, that part anyway. I think Brendan obviously doesn't have the same sort of intellect as Ariel has, and he can only really do the bully sort of side of things.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's no like Brendan's insults are no like as articulate as Ariel's. Like he actually, even with his points he's making, like he said, like we've brought up before, like he was difficult to work with. Like, who really cares? It's not about who's easy, who to work for. It's like who gets the best job done. And in the media sense, Helwani's great at that. And like he said with Brendan, he's like, he was attacking his podcast, comedy, TV and stuff. And they're like, he makes a fair point about it. Like you can't sort of, people in glass house shoot and throw stones sort of thing. Like you can't attack him for maybe he might have done a few things wrong, so he annoyed a few people. And I'm sure there's a lot of people in the MMA community who do not like Schaub. They sort of found out about him through Joe Rogan. And then they sort of I used to listen to him a fair bit. And there was a point where after Volko beat Mendes and he called for Aldo. And I remember because I was listening to him back then, and he was saying like as a joke, like not it was serious, but it's like, oh, settle down, Volko, like you're not ready and that sort of thing. Then after he beat Aldo, he's like, oh, I've been telling you everyone since day one, Volko is the guy and shit like that. Like he's just seen so many different topics. He's just the sort of guy who just follows the trend. And whatever ends, he's going to back, or at least Helwani, he's always the same sort of guy. If he has his opinion, he's at least going to say his opinions, and they're probably going to stay the same. Even if people sort of disagree with him, that he's not going to sway. Whereas Brendan's the type of guy, he'll have an opinion. If it's not the hot flavor a week, he's just going to jump to whatever it is.
Yeah, man. And I think his stock's gone down a lot since he's not just with Rogan. Like when he was with Joe Rogan as a group, with Eddie Bravo, etc. The group was a cool group to listen to. I don't mind listening. I didn't mind his input as part of the whole group. But when he gets on his own and he's off on these other tangents now, it's difficult to listen to. He's not as interesting. It's not as good a listen as it was before when he was with the right people.
Yeah, definitely. And just another thing, how he said he doesn't sort of respect Ariel's like opinions on MMA and everything like that. There's plenty of good guys out there who analyze fights. They do a great job. They've never stepped in a cage. Like prime examples, like someone like Luke Thomas. Like you watch a Luke Thomas dissected video that goes for an hour. Most MMA fighters aren't able to break things down to that level. So it's good to have them guys. They're not necessarily in the fire, but they have such a high level understanding, which you can almost only get by being able to study from the outside and focus so much attention in on that actual aspect of it.
Yeah, man. On that, it just popped into my head. It's not relevant, but Dan Hardy, ex-fighter, how good is he at analysing things, man? He's so good.
He's a perfect example. And does him, Brendan, no, he had beef with Tyron Woodley, I think.
Yeah, that's
everybody's having beef these days.
That's true. Anyway, we'll listen to the last bit of video that I've got is basically Brendan daring Ariel to talk to his face, which is kind of interesting concept. Let's have a listen.
Here's my whole thing with if you want to squash the beef, whatever, if he has beef, that's fine. I dare you. Dare you. Come on the show. You won't talk like this in my face, or I'll fly to New York.
Dude, come on. Come on. Stop looking lost. You're looking lost and innocent right now.
The funny thing for me about that is I think that's a stupid challenge because Ariel's pretty good in the face of people. I think that you put those two together on camera, I think if they're not fighting, I think Ariel Helwani will just tear Brendan Schaub apart in the same way that he already kind of did, like verbally and intellectually. He's got to over Brendan. Of course, maybe respect because he's a fighter, etc. In the big picture, you would maybe give more respect to Brendan Schaub, but in face-to-face debating or something like that, Helwani's going to tear him apart. So I don't know if that's the best invitation. Maybe they will get together. It'll be like a fun thing to watch.
Yeah, I think that's so stupid. Like, he pretty much showed, like, I can't argue with you over, like, facts and that. So come say it to my face, and because I'm bigger and I can bash you, you probably won't say anything to me. Like, that seems like that's his logic with it. But like you said, I think if you put them two in a room in a podcast and you sort of let them go at it verbally, like, Brendan's coming out of this looking absolutely terrible, I think.
That's true, man. So at the end of the day, I think they're two different guys, probably pretty much in two different worlds, right? Like they just live in a different world. Like Brendan lives in that athletic sort of, he wants to be a bit of a superstar sort of world, and Helwani is he's done his time in university. He's worked hard to get where he is. He's trying to be a journalist, like a quality journalist. And they're just living in different worlds, and they don't even produce the same content. They're not even really doing the same thing. Like Helwani's like a traditional sort of journalism style. Brendan Schaub's just like conversationalist and just trying to make himself famous and kind of bring some other people along for the ride. They're just different world. I don't know if they really need to be compared so much, but yeah, they probably should just stay out of each other's lanes, like they said, and just kick on, because although they're giving us a bit of interest at the moment, no one really cares about these two that much. Everyone's still focused on the actual game of fighting in the UFC, etc. So we don't really need these little bickering games between them,
Yeah, exactly right. Like you said, it's like at the end of the day, like the guys who are watching MMA, they're going to watch it for the MMA. They don't care about the sort of a journalist versus like a guy who's trying to become like a celebrity by jumping in everything. So it's like Ariel's got his lane. He's well-respected MMA journalist. Brendan's got his thing, whereas he's the type of guy who he likes to well-respected ex-fighter, but then he has his hands in sort of everything. So I think you just need to, I don't know, sort of why they would even think they have to cross paths or something like that, but just let Ariel do his thing, let Brendan do his thing, and sort of let it be what it is.
Yeah, man. And to be honest, as you mentioned before, my first pick of looking at videos of fighter interviews is Submission Radio. That's just what I like. Those guys that kind of have a little bit of an idea about training. They've done a little bit themselves. And as has the Schmo as well. He's kind of interesting, a bit annoying as well. And then for fight breakdowns, I would say Dan Hardy's the king, man. So I don't know. What do you like listening to, man?
Yeah, so I like the Luke Thomas dissectors for like after the fights are really good. Pre-fight breakdowns, I normally go to Dan Hardy or Jack Slack, who just does his podcast and that. And then, for actual MMA interviews, I normally just go with like Submission Radio. The Aussies, they ask the good questions, everything like that. Or I would go someone like a Luke Thomas. I can't remember. Actually, probably the last Helwani one I listened to was, I think he did one with Volko after Tough or something like that. And I might have listened to that, but even then, like I'm sort of like skipping the parts just to hear the questions and Volko's answers. Like I'm not really too invested into what he has to say, sort of thing.
Yeah, man. Actually, recently this week, I listened to a couple because I looked at Submission Radio. They haven't been pumping them out. So I went to Helwani, and there are actually some really good interviews with top level guys in the last couple of weeks. So worth having a look. But yeah, let's stick to the Aussies. Submission Radio. Stick with them a little bit better. And I must say, every time I flick to Schaub now, he's usually sitting around with a couple of different guys. I don't even know who they are. And I hate it, man. After a couple of minutes, I'm switching it off. I've just got no interest. They just don't say anything that's worth listening to, really. So it's not for me, Yeah,
there's no charisma or anything about him. He's just talking like he's talking. Like there's no like volume or anything behind what he says. Like it doesn't keep you sort of entertained, and you're never wondering like what's his next take or anything. Like when I used to, I can't really listen to him now. I listen to 5 minutes. I'm like, man, can you just shut up and let your guest talk or something?
Anyway, there we go. I'd say in the fight, in the big scheme of things, Ariel Helwani is the kind of maybe winning slightly. Let's see how they go in the future, man.
Yeah, that's my take on it too. I think Ariel's sticking to his lane. He's doing his lane well, and even now it's paying off a lot more than doing the shopper to jumping into like 6 different interests throughout, sort of thing.
That's it, man. All right, bro. Thanks for your time again, man.
Oh, good, bro.
See you, man.